Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
How many famous ghost cases are hoaxes? If ghosts are dead people, how can they interact with anybody? Who or what are the tree people?
Hello and welcome to the 988th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal app from TalkStream Live, or the Paranormal Radio app, I should say, from TalkStream Live, on YouTube and via TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and that was Paul. And today we bring you an open line show based on questions and comments from our YouTube channel. And to join in, you can give us a call from anywhere, 401-766-1240, or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com or contact us via Facebook.
Okay, well, let's jump right in. Well, actually, here's one that is not from the YouTube channel.
Oh.
It's from our good friend Peter Shelley in Bogota, Colombia. We'll start with that one.
Yes, indeed. And we shall jump right into it. So, Paul, what is an example of an interesting ghostly hoax of the 20th century, and why you think it was a hoax?
Well, I think oh gosh, look at my hair. I have to think of the Amityville case in Long Island. I was almost involved with that directly because I was working with Ed and Lorraine Warren at the time. However, I was in the seminary at the other end of New York State when that went down. So Lorraine wrote me letters during that case. I should read those on the air sometime. But
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Of course.
I don't see why not.
yeah. But anyway, the case was soon descending into confusion because there were so many investigators involved, including Ed Lorraine, and excuse me, there was some question about the validity of the whole thing. Now, I reserved judgment on that until Father John Nicola, the Jesuit priest I was working with at the time, or being mentored by, I should say, who was the technical advisor for the film The Exorcist, told me later that it was a hoax. That was good enough for me. Whether Ed and Lorraine were responsible for that, I don't think so. I think the overall problem might have been with some of the other people. I don't know. But I think that is probably an example of maybe one of the greatest hoaxes of the 20th century, if it was a hoax. And I would refer you to the first chapter of our 2017 book, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, because we have a whole chapter on that case. But again, I was not directly involved with it, so I believe it was a hoax, but I don't want to say categorically. Ben?
I mean, I guess it's one of those things where I don't know. I always kind of felt like a lot of stuff was sensationalized. You know, not even just in the Amityville Horror, but like, you know, anything that's on TV, sort of in the mainstream. It's and I don't know. I can't really think off the top of my head about a great hoax and why I believe it is a hoax. I think a lot of it has to do with I don't know. I think of the more modern stuff but I mean, this is the 21st century. If we're thinking the 20th century, I guess, yeah, I'd probably to stick with your...
Whatever's going on now started in the 20th century, really.
That's true, yeah. I guess that's a good point.
Looking back on the Bridgeport case of 1974, the poltergeist case that made the headlines around the world, I was there. I saw the whole thing, but there was some exaggeration in the media. It's a shocker, right?
Yeah.
And... I never cease to get over this, and people look at me when I say it, but the only newspaper that I read that got it right was the National Enquirer. You know, they interviewed me, they interviewed a lot of the people involved, and
Yeah,
that was kind of a shock.
What's the old adage? Release reliable information from inaccurate sources and inaccurate information from reliable sources.
Yeah, that's an old intelligence community thing, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe that was by no means a hoax, but have been exaggerations. One thing I noticed as the 20th century came to a close was that people were getting more used to this subject, wanted to see it more on TV and that sort of thing, and the beginnings of the current interest in the reality shows was starting to take hold.
I'd be curious to see if those are still doing well ratings wise.
No,
Yeah, that's kind
not
of the
as-
thing.
because we're in touch with someone in that business, and there's a lot of revolving door stuff going on. There's some big changes coming to TV, and I can't say any more about it, but it's something that, there are going to be some changes, and I hope for the better from what I'm hearing. But in any case, one of the trends I started to see at the end of the century and into this century was, I sound like Count Dracula or something,
changes.
300 years ago, was that people were more comfortable with this subject. And you'd find that they'd call you for cases, and you get down there and it's a bunch of baloney. They just wanted a TV show, you know?
Yeah.
There were people who sincerely believed that there was, something strange in the neighborhood, but they'd take pictures and it would be pareidolia, it would be nothing in it, but their minds would form impressions from it and sounds, things of that kind.
Well, yeah, I mean, you work with the data points you have, and if it depends on your end goal, I suppose, as well. Is your end goal to heal your home, or is it to sensationalize and make money off of it?
Yeah.
I guess intention comes down to a lot of it,
Well, the ridicule, particularly in the UFO field, has died down a lot because the government's talking about it. And the secrecy extends well beyond UFOs to other areas of the paranormal. That's a fact. But to stick with Peter's question, I think I'd have to say Amityville, as far as I know, anyway.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
All right. Now I have to give a caveat here. These are from YouTube, and we apologize to our YouTube viewers for not keeping up with these. Some of these have been around for a while. People have apparently handles, as we used to call in the CB world. So this is from Halloween Baby, whoever that is. It doesn't say where she or he is from, but it's very brief.
No, a lot of spirits tell you they're dead.
That's it. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's always the shortest ones where we can discuss for hours.
Yes. I'm not entirely sure what Halloween Baby is saying no to. This was a reply to one of our special videos on, I believe it was the Litchfield, Connecticut case that we've been working on for so many years. And how that came up, I don't know. But it probably stemmed from something we say a lot, that ghosts are not dead people, to the best of our knowledge. They are real people, physical and all, living in parallel realities where they never died. Some of these realities are very different. I have, if you've read my 2019 book, Dancing Past the Graveyard, admitted to communicating, not voluntarily, with different critters from different parallel worlds over the years, the past 50 years anyway. Not a lot, but enough to, I think, learn something from them, whether they intended to teach me anything or not. I do not have a guardian spirit other than hopefully a guardian angel, things of that kind. I don't have any kind of mediumistic tendencies or practices that I voluntarily do. I encountered a number of people and non-people in the course of meditation, particularly in the 1970s and 80s. And my opinion was that even if they thought they were, well, some of them had memories of dying. And supposedly, if you are hypnotized or regressed, as they call it, you might have memories of your own deaths. And I'll pluralize that because there are so many facets and versions of ourselves, including our bodies, that the death experience is very common in our super life, as the term we coined. And in this super life, you have all the other lives you're living in parallel realities. Okay, that's a weird concept, but that's good physics. And I think that what Halloween Baby is implying is that we are doing an injustice to people who've actually died. But let's look at that. If you're dead, you're dead. You wouldn't be doing anything. It's the absence of life. And the very fact that you're communicating or think you're communicating with something indicates that they're still alive. In our opinion, you're communicating with people or whatever in worlds where the laws of physics are such that you can do that. Here it can be more difficult, but I think that all key concept in multiverse theory is that all possible possibilities exist, and somewhere or somewhen, and also that the laws of physics can be different, very different from one world to the next. So I think that you're not dealing with dead people, even if they think they are, because I've run into a few who thought they weren't, that they were getting used to being somewhere or someone else in some other consciousness, perfectly physical. I don't think there's any such thing as dead people in that sense. So, Ben, you look like you want to say something.
Oh, I was intensely listening.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay.
Well, I believe that there's really important there's two really important facets to this. Facets, I should say. One of them being, if someone knocks on your door and says, "Hello, I'm from the oil company," and you have no appointment set up. This guy comes out of nowhere, right? And he wants to come into your house and check your oil. And you say, "Okay, yeah, sure," and then he robs your house.
Yeah.
Why would you believe him in the first place?
Well, that's the other thing. You don't know what you're talking to.
No, that's the thing. So that's the key to this whole thing, is understanding that. Why would you believe it in the first place? Oh, well, it tells me they're dead. Okay. Well, how do you know? And I think there's a distinct lack of discernment in that, because it's like, well, I mean, anybody could tell you anything.
Oh, yeah.
I could tell you right now that I am a prince. And I could.
You are? You never told me that before.
But I tricked you.
Oh, I see.
That is a trick. And so
somebody else there in the delivery room that day.
Yes, exactly. Little did you know, Father, that you are not my father. But here's the thing: it's everybody lies, and that would probably, if we're going to assume that these things are human, they would probably lie too. And so if we're going with the same assumption of okay, well, it's a dead person, what makes you think they'd tell you the truth in the first place? It's one of those things where you need to understand that we barely know that we're conscious. We barely know that we're doing anything at all. There's this whole idea of pre-reflective consciousness, which essentially is that it gives you the ability to step back from yourself and look at what you're thinking about and think about thinking. It's a purely human thing that we have the ability to do. Some people don't do it, but we have the ability to do it, and that's really important for this next part, because there's no sort of central cosmology for the world anymore, at least in the Western modern world, where everything's very compartmentalized and disjointed, and everything's separate from everything else. And so one of the really important things is, if I ask somebody at a paranormal convention, well, what do you think happens when you die? There'll usually be some vagaries about, well, you ascend and you transform and you do blah, 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 and you find your spirit guide and you go back to source, which I don't know. It's yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that idea, but you know, it could be possible. But here's the thing, it's also disjointed because it just completely negates the rest of your life. It's like whatever you do in your life, it doesn't matter, you know. I mean, you know, if you're a good person, great. If you're a bad person, well, I mean, whatever, you'll figure it out. And then there's this whole idea of unfinished business. And it's like, okay, well, what is did they not file their taxes? Like like
I'd worry about that even if I was dead.
right. I mean, hey, the only two certainties according to Ben Franklin, you know, death and taxes.
Yep.
And so you even need to pay taxes when you're dead. Actually, that's the one thing that doesn't follow you after you die.
I don't know about that. The state taxes.
That's not true. I know that from firsthand experience.
Yep.
But you know, and I think student loans. I think that follows you too. But anyway, that's a different kettle of fish. Any hoodles. So the problem is that there's no understanding that there's this whole other portion of life that's happening at the same time right now. That there's a whole existence that we just compartmentalize and we take it and well, you know, we do this over here, we put this over here, we put that over here, and we try to fit the pieces together, and then we're astonished when it just doesn't make any sense. So I think the big thing is understanding that first of all, you can't trust anything that a cosmic entity says, right? You know, if somebody's wandering around in the wilderness, you know, a few, you know, 1,000 years ago, and a being appears and says, "Well, I'm a god and I want you to make a temple for me," and they're like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." You know, like some guy's running around Athens, and all of a sudden he sees a satyr walk out of the woods, and he's like, "I want you to build a temple to me," and he's like, "Well, that's Pan, so yeah, I guess I'll do it." You know, but at the same time, it's like you can't trust these things because you don't know anything. We barely know ourselves. How can we know the intentions of something that's quote unquote dead, or a being in a parallel world?
Well, we always qualify things by saying that maybe Halloween Baby is right. Maybe we're all wrong about this.
Could be.
But I've never found it. I've never found those ideas to be good enough. And another important concept, not to take up the whole show here with the one question.
It's always the shortest question.
It's always the shortest question. That everything, time really does not exist as we experience it. That's very subjective with us. We experience it past or future. But in reality, according to physics, time is simultaneous. There is no past, there is no future. So that, in a way, makes it easier to grasp these ideas of parallel lives, things of this kind. So I don't think the point is entirely valid, Halloween Baby, wherever you may be or wherever. But thank you very much for commenting, and we respect your opinion. Okay, here's one just came in from Lauren in Connecticut. Very faithful correspondent.
Indeed. And Lauren writes to us, "Hello, Paul and Ben. I live in Connecticut and wonder if there's any update on the alleged super secret military/private facility in Goshen, Connecticut."
Well, that's a good question. I have to say that we've been working on that case since 2005, and we've gone, as far as that farm is concerned, we've gone about as far as we can go. Naturally, the pandemic took 2 years out of our lives, all of us, and we had not carried out what we had planned to do there. We do, I'm not going to say what we planned, but we do plan to carry it a little bit forward of where we have when the opportunity arises. We've been, there are only two of us with a couple of people who help us. And we've been totally involved in the Pennsylvania Triangle case really since 2016, which is pretty wild in itself. So we're doing the best we can, but I have to say there is no update as such right now. Thank you for asking.
Sometimes no news is good news.
Well,
maybe.
I don't know.
Who knows?
So who's next from YouTube?
Well, this is actually a great pivot into our next YouTube question, which comes from Russ, who is asking about the Litchfield Triangle case regarding the video of tree creatures on our YouTube channel. I've been drawing and telling stories for many years about the tree people in this area. One drawing actually shows the tree person crawling down a tree trunk, and have seen many interesting things, quote unquote, through the years, and continue to do so. I grew up not far from this area and spend all my summertime up there camping. Basically, just drawn to the place for many reasons. You have a new subscriber in me, and maybe at some point our paths will cross, and we can discuss our experiences. Stay creative and dream, and always believe.
Well, I thank you very much for the kind words. I think I'll always believe with reason behind it. I've always said you have to be very careful, just as careful of what you don't believe as of what you do believe. In a sense, both must be sort of knowing and reasoned decisions. But in any case, the Litchfield case is again very interesting. The Pennsylvania case is too. That we had the same problem with that one as well, with the hiatus because of the
Yeah, it really put a
COVID.
damper on things.
It sure did. However, we are in frequent touch with people in both cases, and what would you say?
Well, I mean, we keep. I don't know. We don't sever any connections with
No.
our former cases.
Never.
So we always stay up to date. Anything interesting happens, we always hear from Donna over there, or we
Yeah.
hear from our Pennsylvania
In
friends.
Connecticut, yeah.
We hear from a lot of people. Pretty often. If anything significant happens, they reach out to us and they let us know if there's any major changes. We'll mount up and head on over there.
One of the problems with the Litchfield area case, Torrington, Litchfield, Goshen, Connecticut, is sort of west central Connecticut. And in Pennsylvania, we have had like 4 annual neighborhood meetings. Not since the pandemic, but we hope to get back there soon to do that. And they've grown. People, we interview them on camera about their experiences. A lot of people, Bigfoot and that sort of thing. Strange lights, ghostly phenomena in this flap area. In Connecticut, however, we have never been able to pin down a location to have a neighborhood meeting. I even approached the American Legion there, and I belong to the American Legion, and I couldn't get any satisfaction there. They want all kinds of crazy money or whatever, and we don't have much. So we're considering a Zoom meeting. Everybody's used to that.
Yeah.
So just to get some kind of action on that. Whenever we have tried to produce or worked with a producer, we've worked with 2 of them out there. Something, as soon as it gets to a certain point, some third party comes in and stomps on it. We had a sizzler reel, as they call it, from years ago. We've never been allowed to see it because that's the one where you floated off the ground and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen it, so if I haven't seen it, I can't cooperate.
that we run into roadblocks a lot more in Connecticut than we do in Pennsylvania. I don't know why, because Pennsylvania is pretty dramatic, and there's a military presence there as well, or has been. It's not as obvious as it is in Connecticut, but and we thought we'd come up on a property where that military or industrial or both activity was centered, but that didn't come to anything, so we're still looking for that. And Connecticut's a lot closer to us than Pennsylvania, so
Yeah, it's only hop, skip, and a jump.
yeah.
Yeah, even if it is.
So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I guess that's probably as close as we're going to get to an
But
answer.
what is fascinates me about his point there is that he's aware of the tree people, and we should explain what that is, because that's actually the essence of the question. We got this video, which is supposed to be on our YouTube channel, but I couldn't find it yesterday. Somebody took it down or what?
Not that I don't know. I'd have to look.
I'll have to see about that. But in 2009, we were working with a producer to make that very same sizzle reel that I was referring to. And the little, at the time, 4-year-old boy in the house said that his invisible friend, Ashwar, was in the tree outside. Now, we repeated this story several times. So out we went. Remember how cold it was? It was November.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, geez. It was frigid.
Yeah, and so what we did was to point the, pardon my voice, I explained last week I got this condition, they're working on it. We pointed the IR camera, infrared camera, up into the tree, and sure enough, there's this tadpole-like thing coming down out of the tree, like crawling down the trunk. And it, in the final frame, there's like a flash and it disappears. So, well, what the hey was that? Was that Ashwar? Ashwar later turned out to be a parasite, and we had to, get rid of it because the boy had grown up somewhat, and it was telling him to hurt his mother and this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's no bueno. But
no.
But everything is back to normal, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. As far as I'm very much in touch with him. He's in his teens now. Loves trains as I do, so we're in touch. And so yeah, we always follow up. So the very fact that someone else notices these tree people, as we called it, is pretty cool and pretty interesting. Because people have sent similar videos or still photos to us after they saw that one. So it's pretty amazing. The follow-up to that was, I'll get back to that when we take our break. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in the beautiful Blackstone River Valley of New England. We'll be right back, so stick with us.
1, 2, 3, go.
Go where?
Tell them.
Tell them what?
Never mind. That is Manny Brando, and I am Virginia. And together we bring you the Manny Brando Show every Sunday from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. over ON, AM, and FM.
I like to say something now.
No, time's up. It's Sundays, 8:30 to 9:30 a.m.
Too early for me.
Too bad.
You can depend on us for public service. ON Radio.
Well, there you have it. Welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. It's WON AM and FM radio. And just to sum up that last bit, we will see if we can get that video back on YouTube if it's not there. And quite an interesting phenomenon.
Truly.
So what do we have next?
Let's see. I guess we have taking a few steps back here, back to our question about your answer at least to hoaxes and such. Tammy writes to us, Paul, you said these entities had physical structure. This is referring to the Bridgeport, Connecticut poltergeist case of 1974. Almost bird-like, if I remember correctly. Can you elaborate further?
Yeah, that's the Bridgeport case of 74, as she mentions. And I was alone in the house. It was the Monday night, the second day of the case that we were there. And the Warrens and Lorena got off to do a TV interview someplace. And I was there with the family. And all I can say is 4 entities. And I'd felt there were 4 as soon as I walked into the place the day before. Attacked. They came down the hallway. You could see these, as I described them, sort of off-white, gauzy kind of structures. And one of them walked right up to me. I was trying to protect the little girl, Marcy. I put her behind me. This thing stood right in front of me, and I just instinctively pushed against it, and it pushed back. It had a physical structure. Now these things are supposed to be spirits, demons as we were thinking of them, because we were there for so long waiting for the local bishop to give permission for a Roman Catholic exorcism, which never happened. So that was the basis of the question, I guess. And what I felt was almost a bird-like structure. and I'm no anatomist, but it certainly seemed like that. Now, oddly enough, I found in research in later years that the ancient Babylonians, particularly, and the Sumerians interpreted many of these lower-rung demons as bird-like.
Oh, like Lilith and such?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
and that really surprised me. I said, "My gosh, was I tangling with one of them?"
Well, here's you bring up a really fascinating point by saying that, and I think it comes back to symbols and how they interact with each other, and it's like just it happens to fit a mold, but it's like these symbols are universal. I think Lilith, which I forget what the Mesopotamian word was for it. I want to say it was like Lilith or something. That kind of got anglicized and turned to Lilith or whatever. It ended up being, I guess it was like a wind demon or something was its thing.
Effectively, yeah.
There was a whole bunch of other stuff that was mentioned with that too.
Well, there was a maternal thing too. Yeah, mother goddess.
Something like that.
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of other stuff too that was in there. I think unicorns were thrown in there, and then like satyrs and such. But anyway, the determined as like bird-like things, and I guess that whole idea, it doesn't really disappear. It's one of those things that stays very much a part of the human psyche, or even as a symbol of just stuff that's spooky, or even angelic, if you will. The idea that these winged things are kind of like above us somehow, because they're higher in like a hierarchy physically or whatever. It's a whole thing. I think it is really really an interesting idea to have something that's bird-like being either good or bad. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why we always say that the human the mythology and folklore is the vessel of the memory of the human race. Take, for example, well, this is the opposite of birds, I guess, but cats. In ancient Egypt. They had experience in the remote past with lions who were really not necessarily nice to you. And the goddess Bast, the cat goddess, was originally a lion goddess, had the face of a lion, the body of a woman. When the Egyptians became farmers, they were masters of the grain crop, and they had a good crop. You didn't starve in the winter, And when domestic cats came along and started to multiply, they said, aha, they keep the rats and mice away who otherwise would eat our wheat. So the cat goddess became gradually morphed into a nice kitty cat who was nice to people but would keep you safe, keep your crop safe. So these things evolved depending on our human experience with them. And I had a real human experience with this freaking parasite here. And so there you go.
But the difference is you're not trying to use the parasite for your own ends.
No.
The other
bad idea.
Yes. The other side of the coin is attempting to use it to gain something.
Yeah, well, sometimes, that's and you
see people
that's
do it.
Why we say you don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know what you're talking. If you think it's some kind of spirit guide, well, maybe it is, but is it worth taking the risk? Because it's just as likely a parasite.
Right.
I mean, I can't speak for others, but very, very cautious about that kind of thing.
Agree.
Best to stick with what you know. We have a very interesting, let me get it up here. Yeah. Here's Phil from Savannah with one of his interesting questions.
Indeed. And Phil writes to us, the Connecticut Zoom meeting, I'd love to be on that. As soon as I met Donna, I moved up to Georgia. There's something keeping people away in the Connecticut Triangle. I think it is part of the mystery. It will be hard to get people together.
Yeah, it's, well, I think we ought to try it. We've been talking about it, but we've been so wrapped up with Pennsylvania. And again, we have limited personnel, mostly us, Phil, by the way, was one of our key show reporters in that triangle area in Connecticut.
By the way, Phil, thank you for your service.
Yes, Phil, thank you very much. So, in any case, we'll keep you in the loop on that, Phil, and everybody else. We'll try to limit it to people who have lived in the area or are from the area, and then take it from there. I got another page here if you need it.
Oh no, we have one from Christopher who makes an interesting point.
Okay.
If we can take that real fast. So Christopher writes to us: why do people who believe in reincarnation generally believe it is benign? What's to say it's not the result of malevolence? Someone/something sending us back here over and over to suffer in this world. No sane person would want to come back here.
Okay, well, tell us what you really feel.
I mean,
Chris.
he makes a good point.
Yeah, he does. Well, I think the thing with reincarnation is that, well, first of all, what we've discussed about time on a number of times is that if you have no past and no future in any objective way, it's just a function of our consciousness, how can you have literal reincarnation? If there's no past, there can't be past lives. There are parallel lives, presumably, if our theories are correct. So that being said, I get the point. In the Eastern philosophies and religions, most of which believe in reincarnation, the whole point is to escape it, not to continue it. You know, it's considered sort of a trap. So once you become enlightened, you can escape reincarnation and be, whether you're in nirvana or whatever, conscious state where you can be enlightened and hopefully help others. So when it comes to the classical idea of reincarnation, I think very often a more shallow approach in the West is to grasp it because your precious narcissistic self won't go poof, you know, when you quote unquote die. And sooner or later you'll come back. Now everybody points to, well, I have these reincarnation memories, or I was regressed via hypnosis and had these memories. Well, don't look now, but and I've mentioned this many times. Whenever I talk to regression therapists, people who will, you know, do this hypnosis and get people to remember their past lives, I will always ask, have you had someone describe a world that you don't recognize, or describe a date in the future? And they said, funny you should ask, but yes. So somebody might say it's the 23rd, 24th century, or some time system they don't recognize, or some alien world, or being some other kind of creature, something like this. So I think that's significant if you believe in the validity of hypnosis. And when I first started in this field 53 years ago, boy, time flies when you're having fun, there is doubt about the validity of hypnosis. Now it's been rehabilitated, so I give it the benefit of the doubt. And so, I mean, apparently there are many hypnotists and regression therapists today who will admit the possibility of simultaneous lives because they can't come to any other conclusion if they believe what they hear. So reincarnation is a deep well, and in my opinion, I think it's just parallel lives. People say, well, I have these memories of this past life. Well, you may have memories of a life that was lived by one of your ancestors in this conscious timeline. And for example, there was a scientist who did research on reincarnation memories in twins. And he found that they very often had the same memories. And it turned out, in one case, there were two twin sisters who had the same memories of being this princess in Scandinavia in the 1700s. Well, it turns out that they descended, they didn't know it, from a princess in Scandinavia in the 1700s. So we're talking maybe ancestral memories here. It gets even more interesting when you have an organ transplant. Sometimes people pick up memories and thoughts and habits from the person they received the organ from. So it's all a matter of consciousness. And forget about the island theory. We're not self-contained within our bodies. We are a shared consciousness, I think. So that pretty much changes everything. So reincarnation, I mean, I kind of agree. Have to come back and do it all over again. It's kind of a drag. So
Yeah. Well, there's this really interesting idea that I came across that in the ancient world, Alexander the Great was considered the pinnacle of human perfection. He was like the gold standard for how you were as a human being.
Well, he kind of encouraged that.
He did, but he did accomplish a lot in a very short period of time, and then he made things very confusing for every civil engineer by naming every city the exact same name. It was very confusing. I would hate to be a construction worker in that time period. Anyway, but the whole point of that is he died, and it didn't matter. Everything he made eventually crumbled to dust. And there's a really fascinating thing that I found that was like, I think it's an icon we have in our house of Saint Zozios going to.
Oh, we have the same icon.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I was referring to your house at the front door.
Oh, okay, yes.
Ironically, him going to Alexander the Great's grave, and he's like, "Wow, look at this guy. He did all these great things, but now he's dead."
Yeah.
And so the idea of modern reincarnation, I say modern because I put a caveat on it, because it's like, it's like when we would go to the Providence Zen Center and they would refer to things as California Buddhism versus like
that,
the real thing, because it's
With all due respect to our California listeners.
Yes, it's not meant to be California is bad. It's meant to be like it's just like things get commercialized. It's commercialized, and it's skin deep, right? So the whole point of that whole thing was it's this idea of perfection, my perfection being continued, but it's flawed because inevitably it's like it's not perfect. Some of the most miserable people I know are rich.
Yeah.
And they they have all the money in the world. They can do whatever they want whenever they want, but it's nothing's good enough at the end of the day. And I think that says a lot, because it's like there's this fanciful idea of, well, I'll be reincarnated and I'll do all these things and I'll get to come back. And one of the irking lines for me is, well, we come into this world to experience things, and then we bring it back to the source, or we bring it back and then we come back and we experience things. And it's like, well, why? What's the point? If this all-knowing super consciousness has experienced everything, the human condition hasn't changed at all. It stayed exactly the same. Our gadgets have changed. Maybe that's the new experience. But like at the end of the day, we're all still human beings with still the same inevitabilities and also shared experiences. And you'll find that there's a lot of shared experiences between a lot of people, and that's kind of what brings us all together. One of the things that's really been sort of grossly skewed in the modern world is the idea of identity. And an identity is not what sets you apart, it's what makes you a part of a whole. In the ancient world, what made you Roman wasn't, well, I'm Roman because, my grandfather Gaius whatever, conquered Romania. You were Roman because you did things that were Roman. And so, it was the same with anybody in the ancient world. It's like, you were Athenian because you did Athenian things. And instead of like, okay, well, I'm going to break myself apart and make myself an island, it's what makes us a part of a whole, and we have shared experiences, and as being an Eno, I have the experience of going with my father and going ghost hunting and experiencing this whole odd realm of the paranormal, which makes me a part of that whole paranormal realm with all of these people that we've met over the years, some of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life, to be frank. And, studying this very odd form of this very odd portion of society that people kind of push out. because effectively this comes back to we have no cosmology in the West, and there's no idea of there's no sort of unified understanding. Everything's compartmentalized. You know, it's the same with this modern idea of reincarnation. It's compartmentalized. You know, it's like, well, you know, everything's great all the time, and it's like there's no way everything's great all the time. If everything's great all the time, you're either just not paying attention or like, you know, you're just ignoring all of it. You're ignoring all of it, or just you're numbing it. There's no everybody has their struggles, and you know, I personally, if reincarnation was a thing, I don't want that.
Well, I think we have to give some recognition to the research, extensive research that's been done, where you have children who remember their family, other families, and this sort of thing. You yourself, as soon as you could talk, we're talking about being a soldier and all this different stuff, but I always interpret all of that as parallel lives.
Yeah.
So
I don't
in a
disagree.
way, I guess reincarnation is true in the sense of parallel lives that are all part of your subconscious, all being lived simultaneously as what we call your super life. And when you come close to God in any of those, in my opinion, when you bring in positive energy in any of those or do anything good or positive, that improves your whole super life. Things will get better wherever and whenever you are. Of course, there are always those where you're a parasite or you're otherwise living in a sort of negative life, but those would be very rare and few and far between. My whole theology of that is that God created all possibilities. How do you express infinite love in creation? You would express an infinite creation with all possible possibilities, all melding into a great, elegant perfection that we have not advanced to the point where we can apprehend yet. At least some people. I've known monks who have apprehended it and live in entirely elevated ways, in a sense, you know. So it's all open. That's my interpretation of it. But I think that whether it's reincarnation or whatever, I think it's something much, much greater than the classical interpretation is.
Let me just add one little facet to that. I didn't mean to come across to say, well, you know, it's all
Oh, no,
hooey.
no,
That's
yeah.
not the whole point. What I'm saying is I believe. Well, I mean, I've said this before, and I wholeheartedly believe this, that, you know, we exist in a web of relationships. You know, I know that it's not just me floating around out there. We're all connected to each other.
Absolutely.
And, you know, just because, you know, someone, you know, translates or whatever, it doesn't mean that they're just gone, you know?
Right.
Same thing with reincarnation and such. You know, it's like we had this discussion with Matt Moniz like a couple weeks ago with what is a name, you know? What's the point of having a name?
Right.
You know, why does it matter? And it's like, sure, it's in a form of identification, you know, you can look at it as that, but at the same time, our names mean something, and they connect us to other people. They connect us to other things. They connect us to our families. They connect us to, you know, cultures. They connect us to a lot of things. And it's these connections, you know, even if you want to get into the physics of all of it and say, well, you know, it's multiple worlds, blah, 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 blah. It's like we have echoes of that in all of our traditions. You know, we don't just do things for no reason. The whole point of it is it connects us to others. And that's the whole point of having a web of relationships and being a part of it. Even if you don't want to be or don't care to be, you are, no matter what you think.
Well, Christianity, early Christianity and Judaism had a very deep tradition in some areas of reincarnation. My brother, your Uncle Bob, priest, scholar, author, did his doctoral thesis on a man named Origen, who was an early theologian.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know he did his doctoral thesis on Origin.
You didn't know that?
No.
Oh, well, see, you learn something every day.
Look at that.
Yeah, it's worth being an Eno for what you to pick up. And Origen was an African theologian and bishop who was later condemned for heresy, but he believed in reincarnation. Now, today official Christianity does not, but there is still a bit of a tradition in Judaism. So, I don't know, you've heard our opinions on what reincarnation may be, what the experience might have prompted as far as beliefs are concerned, and there we go. I think we have time for...
Yeah, if it's quick.
Well, I don't know. Okay, you need the second page?
Yes, please.
This is from, again, YouTube handle, That's What She Said.
It's
So That's What She Said says,
yes. While I do agree with the theory that Bigfoot are interdimensional beings, they could also be underground. Are there any caves in the location or areas of hills and rocky outcroppings? I'm going to guess that's referring to
that's
Pennsylvania.
referring to, that was a reply to the Pennsylvania video we did. Yes, there are. That has come up at some of the neighborhood meetings in that vicinity, and it's just you have a large primate, hundreds of pounds, 6 to 8 feet tall, and they just don't, disappear into the woodwork. There are small areas of woodland, 8 or 10 acres, pasturage. It's farming country, pretty much. The houses are not close, but they're common. It's relatively heavily settled. And yeah, there are some, a lot of ravines and underground, some underground caverns, things of that kind. But nothing of which a large population could hide in. How do you... I mean, people know what the bears and other wildlife are on there. How do you keep something as big as a large primate secret? Where would they go? I don't think the cave answer is good enough. The one I encountered pretty much disappeared when my phone rang. Ben's mom was calling, and I agree with most of the researchers who believe these are multiversal creatures. They kind of come and go in order to eat. That's the kind of life they live.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
we'll leave it at that. But thank you, everyone who wrote in. And when we get to our announcements,
Yes, we have a couple things to say. And first, we're sorry to say that both the Parafest in 2023 in Maine in April and the Para Expo 2023 in Massachusetts in May have both been canceled by their organizers. So we have an easy spring, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
it's just the way she goes sometimes.
well, it's most unfortunate. We don't know entirely why, but I don't know. Maybe the recession is catching up with people, and or the venues had some problems. I don't know, but the organizers of both events are highly respected by us, and we hope they'll be back next year. Other events in 2023 for which we or I will be present include the Exeter UFO Festival in September and the Arizona Dowsers Conference in October.
And also, you can visit our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, where you can find nearly 1,200 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on WOON, AM and FM radio. Also, you can hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
And you can certainly download our show app. It's free at behindtheparanormal.com. Browse our books along with those of our guest co-hosts, and just check it out, and you'll find some interesting information there, including our charities we've adopted. So what's cooking for next week, Ben?
Well, excuse me. We have on the back burner next week, that's March 26th, Dr. Jeffrey Kreipel of Rice University will join us from Houston, Texas, to give us some hints on how we know what we think we know in the paranormal. We do love a good amount of ontology here.
And epistemology as
And
well.
epistemology.
Yeah. We leave you today with a thought from, of all people, L. Frank Baum, author of the Wizard of Oz books. Quote, "No thief, however skillful, can rob one of knowledge, and that is why knowledge is the best and safest treasure to acquire." What do you think of that, Ben?
Well, I mean, knowledge that you don't use isn't really worth using, I suppose.
Yeah, we have other quotes that say the very same thing.
Yeah, it's a there's a caveat there,
Exactly.
Mr. Baum.
Anyway, I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey. And we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
We'll see you in Oz.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Broadcasting live and local daily from the Navigant Credit Union broadcast studio at the corner of Park Avenue and Kennedy Street in Woonsocket. This is ON AM and FM.
WOON, Woonsocket.
And now, Premier Networks proudly present Casey Kasem's American Top 40, the 80s. This week's presentation is from March 20th, 1982.
Hello again, and welcome to American Top 40. I'm Casey.